The last $10 bill in Grace Whitfield's wallet was supposed to be her dinner for the week. She didn't know that in exactly 1 hour, that single choice would change the rest of her life forever. It was a cold Tuesday evening in Charleston, South Carolina, and the small family-owned diner called Rosie's Corner was half empty, the way it had been for months. Grace, 26 years old, had been working double shifts just to keep her small apartment lit and her refrigerator from going completely bare. She wiped down table 6 for the third time that hour, not because it was dirty, but because standing still made the ache in her feet worse, and moving gave her something to do besides worry about the eviction notice folded in her apron pocket. Rosie's Corner had once been a bustling little diner, filled with laughter and the smell of fresh biscuits every morning. But after the owner, old Mr. Callahan, passed away the previous winter, his son had taken over, cutting corners, cutting staff, and slowly letting the place fall apart. Grace stayed because she loved the regulars, and because she had nowhere else to go. She believed, stubbornly, that kindness still mattered even when the world seemed determined to prove her wrong. If you believe kindness can still change lives, even in a world that often feels cold, hit like on this video right now, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one. That evening, an elderly woman shuffled through the diner's front door, her coat too thin for the biting wind outside. Her name was Margaret Ellison, though Grace wouldn't learn that until later. Margaret sat alone at table 4, ordering only a cup of coffee and a small bowl of soup, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a worn leather purse. Grace noticed the way Margaret kept glancing at the door, as if waiting for someone who wasn't coming. When the bill came, Margaret opened her purse and began searching through it with growing panic. Her fingers shook as she counted crumpled bills and loose coins, whispering apologies under her breath. Grace watched from a few feet away, her heart tightening as she recognized that particular kind of desperation, the kind she herself knew far too well. Margaret was $3 short, and the humiliation on her face was almost unbearable to witness. Without a second thought, Grace walked over, knelt beside the table, and gently placed her hand over Margaret's trembling one. She told her not to worry, that the rest was covered. Then Grace reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the last $10 bill she owned in the entire world, the one meant to buy her groceries until her next paycheck, and slid it quietly onto the table beside the bill. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She tried to refuse, tried to push the money back, but Grace simply squeezed her hand and told her that everyone needed help sometimes, and that today it was her turn to give it. What Grace didn't notice was the man standing near the restaurant's entrance, half hidden behind the hostess stand, who had been watching the entire exchange in silence. His name was Nathaniel Cole, though almost no one in that diner would have recognized him. Dressed simply in a plain black polo shirt and jeans, nothing about his appearance suggested that he was one of the wealthiest men in the state, the owner of a real estate and hospitality empire that stretched across a dozen cities. Nathaniel had walked into Rosie's Corner that evening for an entirely different reason. His company had quietly purchased the building the diner sat in, and he had come, unannounced and unrecognized, to see the place for himself before deciding whether to renovate it into something new or shut it down entirely, as his advisors had recommended. He had expected to find a failing business with nothing worth saving. Instead, he found Grace. Nathaniel stood frozen for a long moment after Margaret left the diner, comforted and grateful, clutching Grace's hand one last time before stepping back out into the cold. He thought about his own mother, who had raised him alone after his father left, working 2 jobs and still finding coins to give to strangers who had less than she did. He thought about how rare it was, in his world of boardrooms and spreadsheets, to witness something so simply, purely human. He didn't approach Grace that night. He simply paid his own bill, left a generous tip, and walked out into the evening without a word. 1 hour later, as Grace was finishing her shift, exhausted and quietly worried about how she would manage the week ahead without that $10, the diner's manager approached her with a strange look on his face. He told her that the new owner of the building wanted to speak with her, immediately, in the back office. Grace's stomach dropped. She assumed she was being let go. She had heard whispers for weeks that the diner might close, that the new owner planned to convert the space into something more profitable. She walked to the office bracing herself for the worst, her hands still smelling faintly of coffee and dish soap. Instead, she found Nathaniel Cole sitting calmly behind the desk, the same man she had seen only briefly near the entrance earlier that evening. He introduced himself properly this time, and Grace realized, with a jolt of disbelief, exactly who he was. Her name and face had appeared once in a local newspaper feature about his company's charitable projects, though Grace had no way of knowing the detail connected them at all. Nathaniel told her, gently and without any theatrics, that he had watched what she did for Margaret. He told her that in 20 years of running businesses, he had rarely seen anyone give so freely when they had so little to give. He said that people like her, people who led with compassion even when life had given them every reason not to, were exactly the kind of people worth investing in. Then he told her the truth. He wasn't going to close Rosie's Corner. He was going to buy it outright, renovate it, and reopen it under new management, starting with her. Grace would become the general manager, with a salary that would finally let her breathe, benefits she had never had, and a genuine stake in the diner's future. He told her that kindness like hers deserved to be protected, not exploited, and that he intended to make sure it never went unnoticed again. Grace stood there in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face, unable to form a single word. The same hands that had given away her last $10 just an hour earlier were now shaking, not from fear this time, but from a disbelief so overwhelming it felt like the room itself had tilted sideways. Word of what happened spread quickly through the small Charleston neighborhood. Margaret returned to the diner the following week, this time with her daughter, both of them in tears as they thanked Grace again. Regulars who had watched the diner slowly decline began returning in greater numbers, drawn not just by the renovated dining room, but by the story of the waitress who gave everything she had to a stranger and received, in return, a future she never could have imagined. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that kindness still matters. Before we go, we would love for you to comment the word kindness if you believe small acts like Grace's can still change the world. Grace never forgot that the $10 she gave away wasn't really a loss. It was the exact moment her life quietly, permanently changed for the better, proof that sometimes the smallest acts of grace carry the greatest rewards.